Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hello, wonderful women. Welcome back to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast. We have another wonderful woman sharing her story today on the podcast. But before we dive into Jennifer's incredible and inspiring story, we have a sponsor today. And the sponsor is me. So today's episode is sponsored by Your Period Prep Guide. This is the guide I created to support you in preparing for a pleasurable bleed. This is something I often talk about a lot. That is the importance of slowing down before resting on and slowly working your way back into life after your period. So our period is like this master cleanse that our body does. As women, we don't really need to detox that much. Our period is our monthly detox, our monthly rest. You've heard me say it 1,000 times, but in case you're new here, as women, we do not operate on a 24-hour hormonal clock. Our hormones move like that throughout 28 days or more or less, depending on your personal cycle length. So I always like to compare your period, your menstruation time when you're actively bleeding, to perpetual nighttime. It's normal that your emotions are low. It's normal that your mood is low. It's normal that you're tired. Your body is asking you to rest. Now, women have been asking me for a long time how it is I actually create the space for myself to not do chores, to not cook, to not work on my period. And part of that is being an entrepreneur, but I have also had jobs while on this journey. I've worked on farms, at yoga studios, nannying, and I have been able to communicate my needs and make it work for me. If you'd like to do the same, this is why I created Your Period Prep Guide. It's the ultimate guide to setting yourself up for a peaceful and pleasurable bleeding time that will leave you feeling restored and ready to take on the month ahead. So this guide covers anything from the practical things like communicating your needs, preparing your meals ahead of time, including what foods are really great for menstruation for replenishing your minerals and blood, things like cleaning your space, to the energetic things like yoni steaming with a complete yoni steaming guide, how to with herbs, spiritually cleansing baths and ecstatic dance, and finally to different rituals and journal prompts that guide you into a deeper relationship with your blood and your body. You can find the link to that here in the show notes, of course. All right, back to our wonderful guest today. So today on the podcast, we have Jennifer Bopp, a woman who has lived truly many lives. Jennifer's story is one of rediscovering herself after having her womb removed, getting divorced, and shedding her Christian identity when she realized that God is actually everywhere. Jennifer's way of storytelling really weaves vulnerability, ancestral and indigenous wisdom, and taking ownership over life. Jennifer's story is a big one and an important one, with a deep theme around reweaving the sacred womb-throat connection to say yes to her power rather than hiding in fear. This is an episode to take you to the depths, and I know you'll feel incredibly grounded and inspired after listening. Jennifer tends to have that effect. Okay, welcome, Jennifer. I'm so happy you're here. It's so good to be here in this space with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is really fun because, when I started this year of traveling, we came to your home first, and you and I had so many beautiful connections, and I'm sure we could have had many more if we had had more time. And so I'm excited to dive in and just get to know more about your story. So the first question that I always ask everyone is what phase of life you're in. So if you could pick the maiden, those early years, the mother, the sorceress, or the crone, where would you place yourself?
Feel like I'm in between stages kind of right now, in between mother and sorcerer. Yeah.
Why do you feel that way? Tell me more about that.
Um, I feel this shifting. I think probably the eclipse festival really started that shifting even before just stepping into my power,
Mm.
um, being okay with being seen, being heard. Yeah.
Mm. That's amazing. Yeah, the sorceress energy. Like I actually have been really trying to learn about this life phase myself for some time because as we were talking about before we started recording, I feel like there's often just this like jump from the mother to the crone. And
Hmm.
then there's this whole life phase that women go through that's really powerful. And a lot of women share that they feel um, like their creative energy is on fire and they're taking up space in
Hmm.
a whole new way. And we don't talk about that much. And so I think it's really important to like honor that life phase because for a lot of women it feels like a turning point. Do you feel like it's felt like a turning point?
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
That's amazing. So, yeah, let's go back a little bit. I'd love to hear, we always talk about men arc on this podcast. So,
Mhm.
like a girl's first period because that is sort of like this rite of passage that doesn't often get marked in our culture. And I think it's really important to just share these stories so that, a lot of times when I ask women this, they have little pieces that come up and they remember it, or someone else hears it and is like, oh, yeah, that sparked something in me. So, do you remember your first period?
Mhm. I do. Yes.
Oh,
Um,
tell me about it.
oh, so much oh, awkwardness and shame surrounding it,
Yeah.
from where I have no idea where that came from, but I tried to hide it. If you can hide that from your mother, who's doing the laundry and everything, but I did. I tried to hide it, and I don't really even know like how long I hid it. Um, I mean, it was probably just the first one, and she caught on once doing laundry. But yeah, I hid it, and there was always just so much shame around it. Um, I remember feeling like, oh, I can't be daddy's little girl anymore.
Oh,
For some reason, like I was growing up, and I was gonna have to change so much, and I didn't want that.
wow.
Yeah.
So it felt maybe like a little scary that you were changing.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Was there any like education or talk around periods before you got yours?
Not much. When early 90s, school talk, there wasn't much, not much at home either. It was
Yeah.
just, or if there was, I don't remember it. Maybe I didn't want that and blocked it. I don't, you know, recall, but from my memory, there wasn't a lot of talk around it other than school with your girlfriends.
Yeah, that tends to be how it goes. It was similar for
Mm-hmm.
me. I don't remember my mom ever talking to me about it, but I do remember school. Um, yeah, it's interesting because in a certain
Yeah.
you you would think like, well, the thing about like, oh, I'm not going to be daddy's little girl anymore. It's like there is some sort of like grief in that I could see from a young girl of being like, oh, I'm letting go of girlhood in a certain way. And
Mhm.
it's like with any rite of passage, you are leaving something behind. And there's like, I of course don't think that periods are dirty or anything. I think they're the opposite. I think they're like power.
Mhm.
But there is a sense of leaving like your innocence behind and
Mhm.
stepping into womanhood. And perhaps like even as a young girl, you just felt that.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me about like those early years of getting your period. What was it like? Like, was it painful? Did the shame
Mhm.
continue? Like what was going on?
Yeah, they were very painful, heavy bleed, painful, the first few days, cramping, and yeah, just always like wanting to hide it, not wanting anybody to know. I remember my parents coming home from a shopping trip with my brother. I was at my grandparents and they brought this huge bag of pads back, and I was so embarrassed that they bought those with my brother. There's always just this awkwardness around it, and being such a heavy bleeder, afraid that I was going to, show on my clothes and just, yeah.
Mm, yeah. It's interesting how we can sometimes get this shame like so early on,
Mhm.
before like that imprint of shame like often comes in so early for us as girls. It's
Mhm.
crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm. And you grew up in like a pretty religious household, right?
Yes,
Do you
very.
feel like that contributed to some of that?
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Um, I haven't ever really thought about it. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of in the culture in general, but I
Mhm.
sometimes women who like come from very religious backgrounds. I mean, in like whatever religion it is, because most
Mhm.
religions have some sort of stigma around um, menstruation. There's like a lot to
Mhm.
work through there.
There is. And just the disconnection from the indigenous ways of being and the rites of passage. There is none of that in the dominating religions of the Western society today.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you what do you think you like really liked to receive at that rite of passage? Like, would you have wanted like a ceremony, a gift? Like, what
Oh,
would have been special for you as a little girl?
they talk about that Native American tradition, and I've only recently just found out about it where like when the girl is going to have her first bleed, like the entire tribe comes and they walk around and she just cries and just gets it all out, all of those feelings, and the tribe is just there
Wow.
supporting her and witnessing her. Guess that would be nice because I did have all these emotions and I was just so mad. I went through a super rebellious stage, and but just to have been witnessed in that and acknowledged that what I'm feeling is normal
Mhm.
and it's okay, and to express myself how I need to, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true
Mhm.
because, there is this quote, and I can't remember where it comes from. I think it's from a Native American tribe too, but the first part of it is, at menarche, a girl meets her power. And then
Mm,
throughout her cycling years, she practices her power. And then at menopause, when she loses her cycle, it's because she becomes her power. And
mm,
so that first part of like, at menarche meeting your power, it's like power is wild. And so that girl's got to like figure out like,
mm,
what do I do with all this? And to have the village just witnessing, that would be so beautiful.
mm,
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that practice. In one of the trainings I did, the Blood Mysteries School with my two teachers, Nancy and Kristen, we did this menarche reclamation ceremony where we like re-imprinted our first bleed with what we would have liked to receive. And
mm,
so I like to ask that question. And for me, it's interesting because I think as a little girl, like all I would have really wanted, I loved to like read on the couch when I was little.
mm,
And so I feel like all I would have wanted really is for my mom to be like, hey, you can stay home from school today. I'm gonna buy you some treats and you can just like lay on the couch all day. And I'm like, that would have been so awesome for me as a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 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 And now like we just get to give ourselves these things. Do you feel like you have given yourself permission to like fully express your wild emotions in your life?
No, I've
Mm.
just in the last few years, I'm yeah, still walking that out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's big. It's like a lot.
Mhm.
It can be a lot to hold that power. I've heard a
Mhm.
quote. I'm just all these quotes that I don't know where they come from, but there was another quote that said something about how like we're not afraid of the thing, we're afraid of how powerful we are to face it.
Mm.
And I think that that rings true for a lot of women that we have so much power to hold, and the fear
Mhm.
isn't of of the outside. It's often of like, wow, I am so strong, and what do I do with all of this?
Right.
Mm. So those first few years, it sounds like you were still kind of coping with this new phase of life for you.
Mm.
What feels like it kind of comes next? Like if you were to travel along what we call like this red thread that connects all these
Mhm.
stories of us as women in relation to our bodies. You know, some women, what happens next feels like birth control, or other women, it's, you know, we've talked about like starting to shave or having sex for the first time or like
Mm.
whatever it is, like what kind of comes next?
Mm. What's next? Yeah, shaving. Isn't that a strange thing?
How weird, right?
Oh, it is so weird. Yeah, but we did it, and now I don't.
I saw, so I don't, we've been watching a little more TV, and the TV we've been watching has commercials, and I haven't seen commercials in so long. And the commercials lately that came on just last night, I think, was a shaving commercial. And I was like, these are
Oh
still happening?
gosh. Oh, right. Oh,
Oh my
one
God.
one of these days we'll figure it out.
I know. When did you stop shaving?
Oh, 7 years ago, something like that. About
Well,
7 years ago.
how did you make that decision?
Um, just the how did I come to that decision? I don't even remember. I'm trying to think what was going on at that time in my life and why did I do that? That's when I was also like deconstructing and like changing a lot of my thoughts and my ways of being. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm why am I doing this? So I just stopped. And
Mm-hmm.
it's quite the journey to like be comfortable with that, being
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with wearing shorts and wearing tank tops and being seen in that way. It's been
Yeah.
quite a long journey. Yeah. I think just in the last year or so I've gotten really comfortable.
Yeah, it takes
Yeah.
time, doesn't it?
Hmm.
And it's like
Yeah.
to be seen, but also like to see and accept yourself, I feel like.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember in the beginning, it was really hard for me feeling like, oh, other women could look at me and think about, you know, my armpits or whatever. And now it's like I went to a Pilates class the other day and all of these women had shaved armpits. And I felt so proud of,
Oh.
or I mean, yeah, shaved armpits. And I felt so proud of my unshaved armpits. And I was,
Oh.
you know what? I hope instead of how I used to be feeling like, oh, I don't want them to see me. I kind of had this sense of like, I hope they see this and I hope they see
Mhm.
what it can look like to like be
Yes.
intact with your body hair.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I see another woman's body hair, I feel empowered. Like, okay, I'm not the only one. Like, other
Yeah.
people are doing it, I can do this. So, you know, somebody in that class may see you and be on that journey also and want to stop shaving, and you give her the permission to do so.
Yeah. I hope so.
Mhm.
I think we do that by just being our raw, authentic selves in so many different ways.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, so take me back. After those first couple years of bleeding, what
Mm.
happens?
You know, just growing up, just struggling, being a teenager, and all of the emotions and feelings, and being raised, you know, in such a strict religious culture, just really not getting to express myself the
Mm,
way I wanted to, you know, having to, you know, be quiet and be proper. And
mm,
so, you know, and there was never any birth control, never any talk of birth control. Um, got married very young when I was 18, very
wow,
young,
yeah.
too young. I recently had an astrological my chart read, and she's like, did you maybe get married young? And I was like, yeah, I got married really young. And she's like, oh, I wouldn't have recommended that. It's like, no, hindsight 2020. I wouldn't recommend it either, but I did it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's so young, like still. I mean, some
mhm.
people do it and it works for them, but I think for most of us,
Yeah,
we don't know who we are at that age.
no, I didn't know who I was. I
Yeah.
did not know who I was. And he was 10 years older than me
Mm,
also. He had had a vasectomy, so there was no need for me to be on birth control. So I was never on birth control. Um, Never needed to be until I was like 28, and I was always really regular with my cycles, but when I was around 28, I had two bleeds in a month. And
mm,
I was like, this is very unusual. Something is not right. And so I went to the doctor, and I had ovarian cysts. And um, this was back in the time where I didn't know what I know today. So I was just following the protocol, just doing what I was told to do. And they put me on birth control for that.
okay.
And then it kind of helped, but I still, they did go in and remove the cysts. Um, but then I was still in a lot of pain, and
Mm,
just couldn't get to the bottom of it. And it's like, why am I having, you know, all this pain? And it turns out that I had endometriosis. And when they put you on birth control, I didn't know this until after the fact, but the estrogen in the birth control can make that a lot worse.
of course.
So it just really, something that might have just went away naturally, it just inflamed and made so much worse. And you know, I tried to treat it with different types of hormone regulation, and just wasn't getting any relief. And at that time I thought, well, I can't have children, my husband, you know, can't have children. So uh, sounded good to me option was to have a hysterectomy. So at 29, I did have a hysterectomy, and it was kind of like, you know, my grandma had a hysterectomy, my mom had a hysterectomy at the age of 29 also. So
Wow.
here I am having, you know, a hysterectomy at the age of 29. So it's,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's such a it's such a big story, and it's one that's like really hard for me to hear because I know you made that decision, but it just like breaks my heart that there was no one around you to tell you that you could support yourself in
Mm-hmm.
so many other ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy to me, hysterectomy after C-section is the most common surgery performed in the
Mm,
US.
wow.
And it just like absolutely breaks my heart because
Mhm.
there is so much that can be done, like if you, yeah, that makes me tear up. And I know I've teared up you telling me this story
Mm.
before because yeah, I wish I could hug you again right now.
No. Mm.
Um, but birth control is this kind of band-aid solution that the Western medical system loves to slap on any reproductive problem for women. And
Mhm.
it's not one size fits all. And like you said, like if you have something like endometriosis, your body needs to be like detoxing estrogen, not
Mhm.
adding more estrogen in. And,
Mhm.
like it's something that could have been addressed by the root cause. Like there are many root causes for endometriosis and, things with like your diet and your lifestyle and
Mhm.
different herbs that can support estrogen detoxification. And it's just unfortunate that so many women have no idea what their options are because they're not
Mhm.
presented to them because those options don't make big pharma money.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just even the disconnect with my own body, like now I know, like, okay, if I'm presented with something, I can research for myself and decide for myself. And I have the innate
Yeah.
knowing within me to decide for myself. And at that time, I was just so disconnected from, my own power and my own knowing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not even your fault. It's like that's kind of the
Mhm.
default for us as women. We have to reconnect
Mhm.
ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. So, how long after, like immediately after the hysterectomy, like, did you feel like this was a great decision or like when did that sort of
Oh.
change happen?
Um, I was let's see. I was kind of okay with the decision, um, because, my husband at the time, he couldn't have children. So
Yeah.
I was always very okay with the decision. And then a couple years later we got divorced. And I
Right.
was like, oh, okay. Isn't that interesting? But it was what it was.
Yeah.
And, I was single for, gosh, from like 30, like from the time I got divorced until like for like 7 years, like I dated nobody, I saw nobody. Um, so I was really okay with it for a long time. And then I started listening to our beloved sister, Amber Magnoliaville,
Yes.
and just learning a little bit more about the womb and then like realizing like, oh, what I had, done to my body and grieving that. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
that's been something I'm still processing. I'm still haven't probably um, grieved that as I should, like more ceremonially.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm learning and growing and
Yeah. I mean, it's it's interesting to think about it because I think a lot of women would have a similar thought if they didn't kind of learn more about the womb and both the womb from this powerful spiritual lens, but also the womb just from like a holistic health lens
mhm,
that
mhm,
just because you don't want to have children doesn't mean that like your womb doesn't perform really important duties in your
mhm,
body. Like them, like so much of our health as women, I guess it's just if you think about the fact that our physiological purpose is to have children. And I don't mean that as any other thing but our physiological purpose, because obviously not everyone's like life purpose is to be a mother,
mhm,
but the physiological like design of our body is to have children. And so we're healthiest when we could get pregnant, right?
mhm,
And I think that it's crazy to me. I mean, not that crazy because of what we know about Western medicine, but it's crazy to me that they're just like, yeah, okay, you want your womb removed with like no talk about what that
Mhm.
could possibly do to your health.
Mhm.
And not just your health, but like your spirit. Like there's so much
Mhm.
of our power that lies in our wombs. And I don't say that to say like, oh, that's gone, because I also don't believe that. I think on an energetic level, even women who have hysterectomies can connect to their womb space, because that's your sacral
Mhm.
chakra, like that energy is always
Mhm.
there. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy to me that that is such a common thing. And of course, we have like a women's health crisis and women with so many issues going into, their midlife.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've been so blessed to find a really good chiropractor here in the area, and she's worked with me so much for years and years. So constipated, and she's like, "I think
Mm.
it's your pelvic floor. I think your
Wow.
pelvic floor needs strengthening." And I'm like, "Okay, never heard of this before." So
Mm.
we started doing exercises for the pelvic floor, and she's like, "Did nobody tell you this when you got a hysterectomy?" And I'm like, "No, this was not talked about at all," and started doing these pelvic floor exercises. And I started to be regular, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this
Wow.
is how life is supposed to be." Like, and it's
Wow.
just as simple as, some education about your pelvic floor. Like, never ever knew that.
Mm. Yeah, because of course, if you have a hysterectomy, you're going to need to like manually strengthen that area more than
Yeah.
you would otherwise.
Mhm.
And thank goodness you
Yeah.
found someone who told you that,
Yes.
an
Yeah.
earth angel.
Oh, she is. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's also just inspirational to hear that story of like you had a lot of issues with something and then like you were able to shift that for yourself. That's incredible.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm. So you were talking too about, starting to learn about the womb from Amber Magnolia Hill's podcast, which is the Medicine Stories podcast. If anyone hasn't
Mhm.
listened, it's a really wonderful one. And Amber's style of like slow storytelling has really inspired me on my
Mhm.
podcast too. Um, so what did you learn? Like what did you learn about the womb that kind of got you starting this process of perhaps grieving and thinking more about
Mhm.
this part of your body?
Mhm. Um, what was the episode where I don't know who she had on, and I'm really bad at recalling facts and story. I just like I'll grasp the feeling tone of it and then
That's
go
great.
with it, you
Yeah.
know. Um, but it was the one where the womb like can hold trauma, and holds that trauma, and the body holding trauma, and then here, I've unknowingly had this part of my body ripped out, and what has that done to my body? Yeah. I'm still very, very new on this walk with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like such a beautiful time in your life to do it, like in this season of moving into
Mhm.
the sorceress archetype of like just uncovering things about yourself and getting clearer on who you
Mhm.
are in the world and stepping into
Mhm.
more. I think it's such a beautiful time for you to be like diving into this.
It is, and I'm realizing it's so connected to my voice and
Mm.
my expression, and all of those wounds are just so tied and interconnected.
Mm.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for me.
And you're giving me chills and tears.
Mm,
I'm so inspired by the way that you live your
mm,
life and the reverence with which you walk your path.
mm.
It's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the womb and the throat, or some people say like the yoni and the throat are like very connected. And if you look at
Mhm.
Um, People call it like the womb throat or womb voice connection. But
Mm,
if you look at there's these all over Instagram, you could find it, but there's these pictures of like the inside of your throat and
mhm,
the inside of your vagina. And
mm.
they look the same.
Wow.
And
That's so interesting.
I know. And I find that a lot of women do experience that. They
Mm,
experience this sort of connection between like
mm,
waking up to their womb to like having this deeper expression in their voice or the other way. And there is this connection.
mhm.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I, you know, when I had my first cycle and not being able to tell anybody, not wanting to tell anybody, wanting to hide it, like I was always like so shy when I was young too. I was trying to find like where that came from. And I remember um my first wound around my voice was I it was an uncle, and which uncle I don't know because I've asked both of them and neither one of them remember the story, which is kind of heartbreaking because it deeply impacted me, yet neither one of
Mhm.
them remember it. They put tape over my mouth. I was like being a little girl and I was just being a little chatterbox, and one of them put tape over my mouth and laughed about it.
Oh my gosh.
And neither one of them remember this, but yet it so deeply impacted me, and that was such a
Oh,
deep wound in my voice.
yeah.
And so then, my whole cycle and wanting to always hide it and always have the shame and having all of these emotions and not being able to express them rightly or how I want to. There has always been this connection to the voice and my womb space and learning to speak up for myself, having the hysterectomy, not speaking up for myself and not, advocating for a different way and just, my power for not asking questions, just accepting it. And then here I am in this transition from mother to sorcerer and like finding my voice and stepping into my power and this shifting. And I'm doing this little vocal um, online Zoom meeting thing with writing and singing and using my voice. And um, it's interesting. And now here talking about my womb, it's just interesting how it all connects. Mm,
Wow. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I mean, that's such an insane story. With the tape. That's so like how
mm,
traumatic for you as a girl and with your voice and your
yeah.
expression.
Hmm.
Ooh. And it sounds like right now what you're doing is like, with the womb work and with starting to like reclaim your voice, it's just a lot of reclaiming parts of yourself. It's incredible.
Hmm. Hmm. It is. It's
Mm.
interesting. I was really struggling with starting the online class, and my partner was like, "Just remember, Uncle Jay is someone who always has your best interest in mind. He would never bring you any harm." And I
Mhm.
was like, "Do you realize you called him Uncle?" And that's where my wound was like
Mm.
from. So like I know like there's something in
Yeah.
this, using my voice, and I'm just like saying yes to this podcast. This isn't something that I would normally seek out or do, but it's just time to, you know, shifting energy and being seen, heard.
Yeah, I remember that was something you said when I asked you to be on the podcast. You said, "Yeah, I'm trying to use my voice more and share my voice more." And I
Mhm.
love that because like it's like being seen and being heard. It's for us to reclaim our power, but it's also like we're showing up. For me, it has a lot to do with being of service. Like we're showing up to the world
Mhm.
because like I said before we started recording, like you don't know who needs to hear your story.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
like this is a powerful moment for you, but it's also you showing up in service. And
Mhm.
that's a really special, beautiful thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I have, we've all been on this journey as women and we'll be on it probably for forever of learning to be seen and be heard and show up and
Mhm.
take up space. And for me, it's the kind of flavor it's taken is like just getting over myself. Like kind of like just not being mean to myself in any way, but just being like, all right, Natalie, yes, I hear you. You've had this trauma and you don't think you're worthy of this thing. And like, okay,
Mhm.
get over it.
Mhm.
And sometimes like that's the medicine you need.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm curious, when you had a hysterectomy, I know that was like a decision you made and you felt good about it for some time, but was there any sense of feeling like different after, if you can remember?
Mm, um, oh, the recovery was so like hard. And yes, yes, I did feel different. I mean, your main organ of making all of these hormones that make you feel who you are is gone. So having to, get on hormone therapy, and yeah, I did not feel like myself for a very long time. The recovery was terribly, terribly painful.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it took years to feel myself again, to get regulated again. It was several years, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Like a major shift.
Mhm.
And so it sounds like when you got divorced, you said 3 years after this.
Mhm. Yes.
It sounds like that really took you on quite the journey of like rediscovering yourself. And I know a little bit of your story about that as well. So I'd love for you to just
Mhm.
share kind of like how that went for you.
Oh, boy, it was. I mean, I got married at 18, so all of my identity was, a wife, you know, taking, and especially, being in the South, and, being in the community that I was in, like a wife takes care of her husband, does all of those wifely things. So yeah, here I am, just completely shook, that he left, because I was living my life for God, in a Christian community, like preaching, the gospel, and here my husband has left me. So that really, really shook me,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, really changed the trajectory of my life. So I remember like praying on my grandma's porch, just sobbing, like, what is going on, God? Why is this happening to me? Why are you doing this to me? I'm living my life for you. And
Mm,
just sobbing, like, okay, God, I don't really know who you are. I don't, but I want to know who you are. I know that you exist. I know that there's a divine being. So like, no matter where you are, like, I want to find you. And so that led me on this crazy journey, of just complete change. I went to a ministry school for 4 years. I was in that community for 5.
mm,
And then that led me into the restaurant world, and which led me to California to work as a chef there, which I spent some time with my cousins who they are more into the Eastern philosophy, Kriya yoga, that type of
mm.
path. I was always told growing up that they didn't that to pray for them, that they
Oh
didn't
yeah.
that they didn't know the divine. But then after getting to meet them and getting to know them and their walk and their heart and their presence, I was like, I don't know who could judge them to not know, because they know, these are beautiful people.
Mm,
And then I spent some time with my aunt, like a whole summer with my aunt in Washington. And this was as I was kind of like deconstructing and changing, who I was and my beliefs and everything. And my aunt was also one that we would pray for, growing up, because, you know, but then as spending time with her too, I was like, she is very tapped in, she knows the divine. So yeah, that really my life just completely changed after the divorce. And now, the more that I study all kinds of ways of being indigenous and um, just all kinds of ways of being, God is just everywhere, and it just makes the divine more beautiful to me. So,
That's so special.
mhm.
Yeah, it's like what a big transformational journey you've been on. And it sounds like what happened is you had a few big shifts in your life. And it's almost, I don't know if you would say this, but what comes to mind for me is, like having your womb removed. Like your womb is this piece of you, like you said, your hormones that make you who you are. And
Mhm.
then it was kind of like you had that removed, you had the wife identity stripped from you. And so then it's like, okay, I have to like figure out who I am, almost like the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Mhm.
Mm.
For sure.
And like who did you become from that?
Mm, I'm still becoming her. um, Gosh, who did I become? Um, a woman like more accepting and less judging, for sure.
Mm.
Still learning that. I used to judge everything. And so now I'm, much more accepting, more loving. Yeah.
Mm.
Learning about the earth cycles, trying to learn, about my roots, my ancestry, Native American way, trying to, connect with my ancestors.
Mm.
Yeah. Exploring all the things,
Mm.
trying not to be afraid. That was one thing that really carried me through my journey. Um, the passage in the Bible that I just really held on to is perfect love casts out all fear.
Mm.
And I really took that to heart. Like, okay, what am I doing in my life out of fear? And I would just look at each one of those things and like kind of hit them head on, you
Mm.
know. I'm trying to revisit that too. Like, okay, it's time to look again at my life. What am I doing out of fear? And to look at that. Where is that fear coming from? What does the
Mm.
opposite of that look like? What does love look like in that situation?
Mm.
So just exploring all the things, and yeah.
Such a beautiful and deep reflection question. What am I doing in my life out of
Mm-hmm.
fear?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's probably for most of us a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you ask yourself that and you find something that you're doing out of fear,
Mm-hmm.
how do you address that?
Mm. Well, like I went through some um, situations like I was paying tithes out of fear, you know,
Mm.
giving part of my money out of fear because living on a blessed 90% rather than 100% cursed, was a deep rooted fear.
Mm.
So in that situation, I just stopped paying the tithes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to see. I'm going to look at this and explore this and like, you know, see how it goes.
Yeah.
And everything was okay. you know,
Yeah.
um, like just saying yes to using my voice more like this. Like, okay, this is kind of scary. Joining the other Zoom, with the writing and the singing, like, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's fear, but perfect love. Like I see who I want to be, like in that crone era, that wise woman,
Yeah.
and she doesn't have fear.
Mm.
So how does she get there? She faces fear in that perfect love that it's all going to be okay. There's nothing to fear. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love using like my crone archetype as,
Hmm.
like what do I need to do to become that?
Hmm. Yeah, she'll pull you.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. And I don't think many people do that, like really look to or like get excited for or look forward to their elderhood. But it's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful thing to be like, oh, no, like I wasn't at my peak in my maidenhood. I'll be at my peak when I'm an elder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think in a lot of ways, like our culture, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, our culture really wants women to stay in that maidenhood archetype for as long as possible because in that
Mm-hmm.
archetype we're like just very naive and not super connected to our power yet. Even with the
Mm-hmm.
shaving thing, I've talked about this
Mm-hmm.
before. Like maidens don't have much hair on their bodies. And yeah, there's this like focus on how we look and how others perceive us. And
Mm-hmm.
those are all things that are fine in the maiden phase, but the problem happens when we get older and those continue to be things that we look to. And so our maturity, our power isn't happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's important to like really sit with who that crone is, how you see yourself, because I do see her for me as a very, wise woman, not afraid of anything. And so I do, think often like, okay, how do I get there? You know, what situations are coming up in my life that will help me to access her and that power. And like I think back about like how you were saying that you were in your Pilates class and you were proud that you were the only one, not shaved, and how, important it is probably for those other women to see that too. And it reminded me of me and my cousin were on a cruise to Greece in the spring, and we were at some beach in Greece, I don't know, and there were some like older women who like were out there, topless, and you could tell that their tits had never seen cloth. I mean, they were just as tan as can be. And it's like, oh, they are so brave. They're just so brave.
Oh, that's
And,
amazing.
and then my cousin was like, I want to go topless. I was like, yeah, you do it, girl. You do it. and then I was like, I want to too. you know? But it was just so like beautiful, like those women like standing in their power and just being them and not afraid, like helped us little American women to express ourselves in a way where we wanted to express ourselves. And like it's those little situations that like that's getting me to that wise old crone who's not afraid of anything, you
Yeah,
know.
that's beautiful. I absolutely love that story.
Yeah.
Oh, just like the two old ladies inspiring, like that's it. That's what
Uh-huh.
it is to be an elder. And it might seem silly because it's being topless on a
Mhm.
beach, but like I think elderhood is this like it's almost a return to youthfulness in the sense that like you have lived so much life, you've learned your lessons, and now you just get to exist in this space of like play and joy and
Mhm.
inspiring other people. And I think that,
Yeah.
I've heard this from a couple different people before. It's like not every older person is an elder because
Mm,
you really like these questions you're asking yourself, how do I get there? Like that's how you become an elder is by consciously facing yourself and
mhm.
walking your path with truth and conviction and, like facing what comes up in your life with courage. And I mean, you've obviously been doing that.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Mm. I've really enjoyed hearing, yeah, like this beautiful story you have to share of
Mm,
how like learning to choose yourself in a lot of different ways
mm,
and
mm,
like reclaim who you are. And yeah, I mean, it's not been an easy path for you, and yet you've
mm,
walked it with such intention.
mm.
What are some of the most valuable or important things you feel like you've learned about yourself along the way?
Mm. Some things I've learned anyway, that I am strong, and I do have things to offer and things to share.
Mm, yeah. These are beautiful things to learn about yourself.
Mhm.
Well, we've traveled like quite a ways along your journey. And my final question I always ask everyone is if there is a piece of womb wisdom, which I shared with you, is what I call these just nuggets of wisdom that we carry as women, that you'd like to leave the women listening, what would that be?
Mm. Well, I'd like to read a poem if I could.
Yeah.
It's Rumi, it's the guest house, and I like I come back to this often.
Mm,
Um,
love that.
have you heard this one? The Guest House by Rumi?
I'm
It's
not
great.
sure.
Okay. This being human is a guest house. Every morning is a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing out, he may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And I love that so much. That would be my wisdom. Yeah, things that I've learned and I continue to learn and go back to that sometimes we want things to pass, that all that shame, all that guilt, all that the crying and the sadness, but like do welcome them, and just because this is life, this is the beauty of life. It's not just the joys; it's all of those times in between, and it's just part of it. And when you can welcome them, and it makes it easier.
Mm,
Um,
thank you, Jennifer. It's so
mm,
such a beautiful poem and so well said. And yeah, thank you.
mm,
Hmm. Well, it's been so special having you here. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story so that women can hear it and find medicine from it and connect with you. And yeah.
for holding the space for me to share.
Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.